What's going on YouTube? It's the Snake Guy and I'm back with another video. So, you brought home your new snake or your new reptile from the Reptile Expo or the reptile store or wherever you bought it from. And you want to take it home, you want to set it up this beautiful, nice, lavish enclosure. Some want to do bioactive, some want to do naturalistic. But before you do that, there's a very important step you need to take first, and that is quarantine.
The Snake God.
Alright everybody, so welcome back to the video. So like I said, we're talking quarantine today. I feel like it's a very overlooked process, especially with new reptile keepers. A lot of people assume that just because it's the only reptile you have, you don't need to quarantine. And that is not true at all. Quarantine is a very, very important process because you're looking out for everything, whether it be things you can see or can't, but you want to make sure, you want to ensure the health of that reptile before you decide to put them into a more permanent enclosure. A lot of people always quarantine for, mites. Mites is always the big one, but not just mites. Mites, any other parasites, whether they're peeing and pooping, shedding properly, also just their behavior, how are they acting, and things like that. Now, of course, there are going to be some things that you can't see, which you'd want to get tested for. However, quarantine in general is something that definitely needs to happen prior to putting them in your reptile room or putting them in their permanent enclosure. Alrighty, so first, what is quarantine? I've said this word a few times, and if you're new here, what does quarantining mean? I'm sure after COVID we all understand what quarantine is, but for the sake of this being an educational video and it being about reptiles, I'm going to read you the definition off of what I looked up. And quarantining new reptiles for 30 to 90 plus days in a separate room is crucial, non-optional practice that prevents the spread of parasites, mites, and contagious diseases to existing collections. It allows for monitoring health, feeding, and shedding while reducing stress and facilitating veterinary checks. So what that means is basically you're going to set up a very basic enclosure, typically with nothing but paper towel. Some people use paper, some people use newspaper, but you're going to have a very base substrate, a water bowl, and a hide. So basically you are meeting the very basic of requirements in order to keep said animal. And again, the reason for that is you are basically doing daily checks and monitoring that animal. Are we getting bowel movements? Is the snake eating properly? Do we see any issues with stress that's causing this animal to behave in a weird way that they're not supposed to? Me personally, I like to use paper towel, simply for the simple fact that you can, if there is a situation with mites, you can see the mites a lot easier. So if you're using like that brown paper or any type of dark, replacement substrate for the time being, it's going to be really hard to see them. So paper towel for me is always best. Aside from that, let's say you do have other animals. The point that I want to point out, it's very important that you keep them as far away from your reptile, your current collection, as far as possible, because you increase the chances if there is something wrong with that snake and passing it on to your other snake. And that is the last thing you want, especially if everybody that has a large collection, these are at the same time they're pets, but they're investments as well. So if you put something in the room and number one, you don't know the particular person or breeder you got it from, you don't know how they keep their snakes, and you just put it in with the rest of your snakes, yeah, you increase the chances of passing on whatever that animal has to the rest of your collection. And I promise you, as long as I've been doing this, I've seen a lot of collections get wiped out, even from the smallest of things. So you have to be very, very careful, very sanitary. Another thing, when I quarantine my animals, I clean every day or two, every 2 days. If there's a poop, I'll go ahead and clean it immediately. But if they're just in there and there's no poop or anything like that, I'll go 2 days and then I'll clean again. 2 days, clean again. Just to kind of keep up on that. I use chlorhexidine for, to keep it sterile, to keep it clean as my disinfectant. And that is the best process that I have, that I use. And another thing, a lot of people talk bad about snake racks, especially if you have a a baby snake, it is the perfect environment to quarantine, or even just a tub setup in general. The perfect environment to quarantine a particular snake because it's a plastic tub, so you won't have a problem with humidity. You can also heat it, and then, like I said, you can do the paper towels. It's most of them are frosted sides, so it's also still going to give the snake that security. But if you're using those black plastic PVC hides, you throw one of those in there as well, and you still get the same effect. So ultimately, when quarantining, you are checking for any irregularities in, you know, health, whether, like I said, whether it be any infections or diseases or anything like that. You're checking for any irregularities with bowel movements, you know, if you've had them for 2 or 3 months and they haven't had any bowel movements, depending on what snake we're talking about. Also, if the snake isn't eating or drinking water and you're noticing that they're getting thinner, having them in quarantine is definitely going to help you identify those issues. Now, how do you know how long to quarantine your animal? Most people say at least 30 days. I do an automatic 60. So when I get a new animal, typically you won't see that new animal on, you know, on my page or anything for at least 60 days. From there, it's going to be personal preference. I do 60 just for the simple fact that that's just my process. There, you know, maybe something you may not see in 30 days, and then, you know, they start doing something else, or they start doing something, you know, like the 34th day after, you know, you've put them on substrate and you've decked out the enclosure and things like that. So just have to pay very, very close attention. Have a good process, trust that process, and go with that process. Now, I do want to speak on something else, because there are people who believe that quarantining without testing is pointless, and that is completely false. I am a firm believer in testing. My animals, I have a vet here that I take my animals to, so if I want to do any testing, I'll just take them to the vet. Me personally, you're not just quarantining just for things you can't see, like I mentioned before. You're quarantining for things that you can see, things that are happening right in front of your face that you can't test for. So to say that there's no point in quarantining if you don't test first is, in my opinion, stupid. At the end of the day, you have to do what's best for your snakes. You have to do what's best for your reptiles in general. So quarantining, putting them in a sterile environment so you can view them, because that may be the reason you want to get them tested. Now, I know a lot of people who don't test automatically, and that's perfectly fine. That is their process. But again, to say that quarantining is not needed unless you're testing is a little crazy. So just quarantine your animals, no matter what you do, no matter who you get them from, no matter how well you know the person. Quarantine, quarantine, quarantine. And I cannot stress that enough, because I've seen too many people get complacent and then boom, something happens because they weren't able to catch it, or there were signs there and they didn't see it because the animal was in this lavish enclosure. And yeah, because 9 times out of 10 when you get a new snake home, most people will tell you, I know I'm one of these people that tell you leave your snake alone for a week or two. Me personally, I don't handle my snakes until after they had their first meal. So if you're leaving them alone, most people aren't going to go in there and look around and everything like that, because it can add stress, which is understandable. But in a sterile environment, one hide, one water bowl, and make sure they have heat and everything like that. You can slowly lift it up, check on them, lay eyes on them, boom, and that's it. So it's really, really important thing. I honestly feel like this is like reptile 101. I honestly don't know why we're still having conversations about this. Quarantine your reptiles. It's safer for, not only safer for you, but safer for everybody else. But this is also the reason I said, if you're on Facebook, I did a video on why not travel to expos with your reptiles, because you open them up to be susceptible to other diseases and infections that you don't want. There is no reason to take your animals out, you know, to a place where there are other reptiles where you could possibly get them sick. So there are some people that still do that, which is why you, the buyer, when you get a reptile and it is from that expo, you take them home and you quarantine them, because you just never know what you're bringing into your house. With that being said, that is the end of the video. I hope that helps someone. If you have any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you haven't yet, turn those post notifications on. I am uploading every Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That way you don't miss any uploads, and I will see you guys in the next video.